Glad to see all of you here. Skeleton crew out there and up here. That's okay. I half of me has been tempted to just dismiss and say it's a beautiful day, but I think that's a presidential prerogative. I'm not sure I'm allowed to do that, so we're not going to. I will try to keep it interesting because I know you have a lot of other things going on. It's a beautiful day, so I get that. I'm not doing a song or dance. I don't dance for more than spiritual reasons. Skill has to do with it too. So before I get into what we're talking about today, let me just throw something else, a side issue, but today's eclipse. If you have a chance to go to totality, it's pretty incredible, honestly. And I'm sure if you're on social media at all, it was kind of alluded to a little bit. You've heard the symbols and the signs and the blood moons. And don't get wrapped up in that, please. We don't need secret symbols to serve God. God's not hiding his message among eclipses. And he just doesn't work that way. He displays his glory, but he doesn't hide his symbols and hide stuff from us. So please don't get all worked up and wrapped up in that kind of stuff. It distracts us from the reality and the glory of serving God. I'm off my soapbox for the moment. I may get back on. We'll see. I want to pick up and tag on to something that was preached last week. If you were here for Dr. Prophet's message Wednesday, incredible truth there, very practical. And as I told him earlier in talking today, I planned to preach something else this morning, and my mind got stuck on Saul in relation to what he preached. I don't know, and those of you who have preached or will be preaching will understand this, or someday will understand this. I don't know if it's God's direction or if it's my own brain stuck, but I'm going with it. God can use it either way, so let's do this. King Saul in the Old Testament is excellent, horrendous example of what happens when we get stuck in. Before I finish that sentence, I'm debating how to, because I'm basing it on what he said. How many were here Wednesday? Most were? Okay, so you understand the idea of what I'm calling scared little boy syndrome, right? You're in a position and you're like, I can't do this. I'm scared, I'm terrified, I'm not good enough, right? So you understand that's the idea. Well, Saul is an example of what happens, is a striking example of the worst of what can happen when you live there. So let's just jump into it here. We're moving through the story of Saul, just like snapshots through his life. So I'm not going to take one passage, but if you want to follow along, we're in 1 Samuel, starting in chapter 9, and then going through chapter 18. And so on and on from there. I'm going to assume also you have at least a basic understanding of the story and not going to stop and read everything because that would take far too long. But we know the story, I assume. Saul is out looking for his donkeys, his father's donkeys, and he can't find them, and he goes to ask the prophet Samuel, and Samuel anoints him king and says, you're going to be king. And in 1 Samuel 9, Saul responds to Samuel, who meets him and says, you are the hope of Israel. And Saul says, I'm a Benjaminite. That's the smallest tribe. My family's the smallest family. What are you talking about? This is crazy. I'm not the guy. And we see right there, is it humility? Is it worthlessness? All right, sometimes on the surface, those can be hard to tell apart. We'll talk about the difference in a minute. But we certainly see he's not looking for the limelight. He's backing off. And then as we move on through the story, we realize there is fear here. Because he comes back in 1 Samuel 10, he comes back home, and he meets his uncle, and his uncle says, so tell me what Samuel said to you. And Saul said to his uncle, 10:16, he told us plainly the donkeys had been found. But he did not tell him about the matter of the kingdom, which Samuel had mentioned. Like, he's not saying anything about, hey, yeah, have an anoint me king, too. It's a little detail. It doesn't come up, all right? So is he embarrassed? Is he, there's these questions. But as we move on through, what we see is Saul becoming more and more focused on fear. And it really becomes clearer in chapter 10 later on as Samuel now is going to make the big announcement of who is going to be king. They've all asked for a king, and so Samuel brings them together, and he starts casting lots, which is how God indicated his will in the Old Testament times in many cases. And he casts a lot in verses 20 and following to the tribe of Benjamin, and then a lot dividing among the Benjaminites, and the Matrite families taken, and then Saul is decided by Lot, this is God's choice for king, and they look around and where huh? He's not here. And God says, he's hiding over with the baggage, like everybody's luggage. He's hiding among the luggage. Go get him. And so what we see Saul doing right there, he knows what's going on. He knows what's happening, but he's scared. So here it's not humility, it's fear. Humility doesn't say, no, I can't do that, I'm not gonna, right? Humility does not freeze us in place. Humility motivates. So what Saul is doing now is just scared. He's just hiding. He knows God wants him as king, and he's not willing to step up and do it. So Saul brings him out. Samuel brings him out. And forgive me, sometimes I do think people in the Bible get it wrong sometimes. So Samuel brings him out. And he in verse, honestly, as I was about to walk here, I realized, you know what? I copied and pasted, the story, but I didn't actually put all the verse numbers in the passage. So somewhere between verses 20 and 24, Samuel says to the people, it's 24? Okay, thank you. Verse 24, Samuel said to the people, do you see he whom God has chosen? Surely there was no one like him among the people. I know Samuel's a man of God. He's also human. So forgive me, you can disagree if you want, but I don't think that was the right response here. Look at him. He's the best. He's taller, he's stronger, he is the awesomest guy here. Follow him. That's what Samuel says. Maybe, and I try to read into it and understand what's going on, did Saul pick up on that? Okay, yeah, I can do this because I am the best. I don't know. But you can see Saul starting to focus on the surface stuff. He's scared, as anyone would be in that position. But he can do it because he's the best. You follow where the problem's starting in? The scared little boy now has to prove he's not the scared little boy, and he runs into problems. Now, he's got some good stuff too. The Bible's very realistic. It gives the positive and the negatives. So down in verse 27, skipping through a little bit, but there are some people who's like, no, he's not going to be our king. We don't want him. Certain worthless men said, how can this one deliver us? That's the main job of the king, is to deliver from the enemies. How can this one do it? And they despised him, did not bring him any present, a token, a welcome gift. We're on your side. But Saul kept silent. He didn't respond, which is a positive thing in this case. Right? He's like, okay, I'm not going to force it. And so we have this, as life often is. There's both sides going on. On one side, he's really scared. He's apparently starting to focus on surface things. And yet he's also trying to do what's right. We see that a little later. He has some victories over the enemies. And then in chapter 11, verses 12 and 13, the people say, who is it that said, don't let Saul reign over us? Bring him here. We're going to put him to death because that's treason. And Saul's like, no, we're not doing that. In that culture, that's what you do. If you're the king, anyone who speaks against you is a good chance of them beginning rebellion. It's treason. You kill them. That's how you keep your kingdom together. That was a standard way kings handled things back then. And Saul's like, no. Verse 13, not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has accomplished deliverance in Israel. So you can see where there's some positivity. He's focusing, no, God's the one who delivered us. It's not about me. And yet, as we move on, what we find out is the positive is sort of a blip, all right? Yeah, he made a good start in some ways. Let me just pause and say this. A good start doesn't guarantee a good finish. Neither does a bad start guarantee a bad finish. it's a consistent thing every day. God can build you up. In fact, to tell you the truth, what the background here, and I may preach this later, I started out wanting to preach on, when people got it wrong. Some people failed and recovered, others failed and crashed and burned, and I wanted to compare those two. What's the difference? And then I got stuck on Saul, and this is the result. But we do see that a good start does not guarantee a good finish. So Saul's start was actually fairly positive. There was some negative aspects too. But what we see is he pretty quickly starts focusing on self. What sticks with him is, I've got to be the best. So we come down to chapter 13. And this is where they're in war, they're in battle, and the people are scared. Verse 6 and following, the men of Israel saw they were in a strait. They hid in caves and thickets and cellars, in pits. Some fled. They crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still in Gilgal. He was still there with the army, but his army is scattering, all right, because they're seeing what's happening. They're terrified. The background was that Samuel said, I'm going to come sacrifice. Don't start the battle till I sacrifice. Seek God's favor. And they're waiting for him. And the army's scattering. So Saul said, bring to me the burnt offerings and the peace offerings. He offered the burnt offering. And so he's starting to see himself as, I'm the guy who's got to make this happen. Right? If I don't do this, it's going to fall apart. So he's willing to step beyond what God says because it's all about him. And it becomes even clearer. After he just finishes offering the offering, which he should not have done, Samuel shows up and says, what are you doing? Hey, that's not your job. What's going on? And Saul's response, because I saw the people were scattering, what's the next two words there, if anybody's looking at that? I didn't give you the verse number. Never mind. He said the people were scattering from me. The people were leaving me. And you didn't come, and so, and therefore I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal. I've not asked the favor of the Lord, so I forced myself. It becomes very much, I'm losing my army. You follow what's going on here? This is not just Saul. This is something that this dynamic goes on not just in spiritual life. It goes on in business, in relationships, across the board. Fear drives you to be self-centered. It's all about me. I got to protect me. And if we don't deal with that scared little boy syndrome, we end up there. It's all about me. All right? And Saul, it just keeps going. We come in chapter 14. And again, and what we see in chapter 14 is he started making some really bad choices, some stupid decisions, and doubles down on them. So they're facing a battle, and Saul says, you know what? We're going to fast. Sounds spiritual. We're going to fast today. Guess what? There's a time to fast. When you're about to go into battle, it's not the time to fast. All right? That's to be realistic. Verse 14, Saul had put the people under oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food before evening until I have avenged myself on my enemies. Now we're bringing spirituality into that. It's about me, but now we're bringing spirituality into this too. All right? So none of the people tasted food. And then, as the story goes on, Jonathan didn't know that. Jonathan ate. He actually won the victory, and Saul's like, you ate when I told you not to, you're dead. And the people are like, oh no, he's not, all right? And they step in and rescue the king's own son from the king's stupidity. Because Saul is so focused on, I said this, I did this, how dare you go against me? And what we see is he's trying to prove he's good enough the whole way through here. Well, then we go on, and God says, go against the Amalekites. They really fought against Israel. I promised them that they were going to be destroyed because of that. Now I want you to carry through that punishment I have declared against the Amalekites. So in chapter 15, we have the battle. They go in there. They destroy Israel's enemies. And they're rejoicing. Samuel shows up again, and he got bad news. And I won't go into all the details there. You probably know the story. But Saul says, I did what God said. I destroyed the Amalekites. And Samuel's like, no, you didn't. Because you didn't kill the king, and you didn't destroy all their belongings. I still hear cattle and sheep, and that's not normal on a battlefield. You don't bring your flocks and herds to the battle, so therefore, obviously, you didn't bring them. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. You understand. I hear these things, and you didn't destroy them. And Saul responds, the people took some of the spoil, the sheep and the oxen. Let's make it spiritual. To sacrifice. But the people did. We see the king scared the people. And it comes down a little further. And Samuel says, no, the Lord does not have as much delight in burnt offering as in obedience. Do what you're supposed to, whether you think is the best thing to do or not. And Saul says, I have sinned. I'm sorry. Yes. Saul says, I've sinned. I've transgressed the command of the Lord because I feared the people and listened to their voice. Fear is a terrible motivator for life. Can I tell you, I've served on a number of different boards, and I'm remembering one situation on a church board, and it seemed like every time the board wanted to try anything new, there was a guy on the board like, no, we can't do that. We shouldn't do that. No. And I'm not talking about like crazy stuff, but anything out of the ordinary, like let's connect with the local schools to start outreach there. We have opportunities to work. And like, no, I don't think we should do that. And at one time, as they were talking, this guy said something like, I've been in churches where they start doing other things and it all went downhill, and I'm just afraid we'll do the same thing. Okay, and it clicked. This guy's motivated. He's afraid that if we do something, he'll do the wrong thing, so he doesn't want to do anything. That's really, really frustrating. Fear is a terrible motivator. You're always going to make the wrong decision when you're motivated by fear. I've sinned, but the reason is I was scared. So he's making excuses. He's driven by fear. And then Samuel responds, and then God has... You've turned away from God. And then Saul, then down verse 30, Saul says this, I've sinned, but honor me now before the elders and before Israel. Fear makes you more focused on appearances than reality. I've sinned, but don't let anybody know, right? We start building these facades. I got to hide who I really am, because if people knew who I really am, they'd reject me, or they'd stop following, or they'd make fun of me, whatever. I build these facades. I'm more concerned about appearance than what's really going on. My father-in-law, who teaches here a little bit, and it's, was here, prayed in chapel Friday, I think. Anyway, he has a saying I love. He said, it's what I am is more important than what I seem to be. I wish I'd come up with that. What I am is more important than what I seem to be. Fear, and we're trying to protect the fear in us, like we don't want to admit to fear. It drives us to be so concerned about appearance that we can neglect reality. So Saul goes on, and David shows up. And jumping over, a lot of stuff happened. Chapter 18. David has killed Goliath to become the hero. Saul has started recruiting, drafting anyone who's good at war into his army, right? And David comes in, he kills Goliath, he's the hero, and he's going out, and now he's leading part of the army. And as they're going, David has returned from killing Goliath. The woman of the city, chapter 18, verses 6 through 9, they're coming out singing to meet King Saul with tambourines, and they sang as they played and sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And it hits him. It hits Saul hard. He's like, no, this can't be. Because what more, in verse 9, what more could he have but the kingdom? Protection, right? It's my kingdom now. And we're far past the guy who's like, I'm not the guy for this. But now it's my kingdom. How dare, and so what happens is Saul becomes very jealous of anyone more successful, more able than he is. Jealousy is normally motivated by fear or anger or maybe pain. It doesn't excuse it, all right? Our reaction, a sinful reaction to pain is still sin, all right? So we're not excusing anything. But I'm telling you, jealousy is normally a secondary response to pain, feeling ignored, or uncertainty, or something fear-based. From that day on, in verse 9, Saul looked at David with suspicion. Because one of the great strengths of GBS is that not just President Loper, he's certainly part of it, but presidents have intentionally recruited the best and not been threatened when someone else may have more skills. All right, the leadership is not afraid of I want to be really careful here because I'm being streamed, and I want to sound like President Loper is not the best. All right, you follow me? I just realized this sounds terrible if I say it this way. But you know what I'm saying. A good leader recruits people who are better than he is. I read a book on business once, and the guy who's writing the book has a business. And he made the comment, he said, I've always made it a practice to hire the very best talent I can. And at this point, I'm glad I own the company because I'm not qualified for a job here. Like, and that's a powerful, when you bring people around you who are better than you, that's powerful. But when you're based and motivated by fear, you're threatened by those who are better than you. And that's terrifying. And again, we're talking, this is spiritual, but it happens in business, in relationships, in churches. It happens across the board. Don't be threatened. I've realized and knew it and had to, it's very real. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Now, let's be honest. When you have a doctorate, there's lots of DERs around here. I got to tell you this real quick. When I first got my doctorate and I do something stupid, okay, my wife, she would tell, PhD. I didn't mind. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm still, it was good for me. I don't know. But there are people for whom I have a doctorate. It's their identity. And then you better respect the doctorate. Does that make sense? Now, it can be it can be 100 other things. I'm a business owner. I'm an athlete. I'm the popular person. Whatever that identity is, we become protective and defensive about that. And so Saul starts seeing David as, no, I got to be the best, and he's threatening me. We find several times as we go on down. Verse 15, now Saul was afraid of David. Again, don't have verse numbers on there. 28, 29. When Saul saw that David was prospering greatly, he dreaded him. You move on down a couple verses later. Saul was even more afraid of David. And there's this protective, fear-based reaction that makes Saul just so focused on David and destroying David and stopping David. That's all he cares about. And if you really read carefully, at one point, God says to Samuel, go anoint David king. And Samuel says, if I do that, Saul's going to kill me. It was known to that extent. Saul was so focused on my kingdom that even the prophet of God knew if I do this, my life's in danger. please don't be fear motivated. So how do we do that? I won't carry on. We know the end of Saul's story, horrible end. Goes to a witch for advice, finally dies on the battlefield. What do we do? Because let's be honest, scared little boy syndrome is pretty common. I would probably say everyone has experienced it or experiences at times, all right? How do we respond to it in a healthy way? One thing that struck me is when God later talks about Saul, he says, when you were small in your own eyes, I brought you up, I made you king. That's not to say this fear was healthy, but it's something God can use, okay? How do you handle scared little boy syndrome? First of all, the quick answer is simply humility. What is humility? Humility is not the feeling of worthlessness. Humility is not like everybody else is better than me. Humility is this: understanding I am God's creation. And everyone else, all of you, are God's creation. I'm neither more valuable nor less valuable than all you other creations. All right? It's recognizing the basic intrinsic equality of created people. And when I'm there, then I can love my neighbor as myself, because I'm not threatened by the neighbor who's better than me, the neighbor who's more popular than me, the neighbor who can do what I want to do. We all have an ideal image of ourselves, don't we? None of us live up to the ideal image of ourselves. We see others who seem to live up to the ideal image of ourselves. And maybe that image is how I look, my talent, wealth, whatever it is. But if I am truly understanding that my value is in God, as a creation in God's image, and so is yours, I can relate to you as equals. Not equal in role, understand that. We have different roles we fulfill. I have bosses and you have bosses, right? But essential equals. I have value. If I have value, I don't have to find my value elsewhere. My value is not in a doctorate. My value is not in money. My value is not in skill, all right? And that's hard to grasp. It's easy to stand here and say that. It's really hard to make that part of your fabric. But God can walk you through that and help you understand in a deep way. My value is not in what I do or what I can do or what I have. My value is in Him. And that sounds very spiritual and frankly sometimes kind of shallow. But it's reality, all right? Understanding my value is in God, in the image. I am created in His image. How do you handle scared little boy syndrome? You recognize we're all equal. And we're probably all scared little boys in some ways, or girls, all right? In some ways and at some points. Number two, you face your reality. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And God can use your weaknesses as much as your strengths. I've always... Sometimes I say things and they sound terrible. I will say it this way, and it'll probably sound terrible. But I have struggled more giving God my weaknesses than my strengths. Being able to recognize God, I'm terrible at this. I may never be good at this, and it's okay. Now I can come to God and say, yeah, I can study Scripture and preach, and I'll give you that. That's yours. That's no problem. But to be okay with stuff I really want to do and can't do, that's tough. Face your reality. Take it to God. God can handle your reality. However ugly it is, He can handle it. Remember Solomon? Solomon, he's made king, and God appears to him and says, what do you want? And what's Solomon's response? He's up front. He's a terrified little boy. He literally says, I'm a child. I can't do this. You ask me to lead your people? No, I can't do this. And God says, that is a perfect answer. I got you, right? It's incredible. What about Moses? Moses is out and he's called at a burning bush and God says, I want you to go let Israel go. And Moses is like, I can't do it. I can't speak. And he's got a list of excuses. And God walks him through because God's seeing the excuses are not, the excuses are based on actual fear. All right? And I don't have time to go to it right now. It's not my notes or I'd read it to you. But if you follow, Moses says things like, I can't speak. They won't listen to me. And God's like, well, Aaron will help you. I'll help you. Until the last time he says, just send whoever you're going to send. Which sounds great. What he means is, find somebody else, right? And do you remember what the Bible says God's response was? Anger. He's very gentle, patient, working as long as it's struggling through the stuff. When it comes to, I just don't want to, God's like, no, you don't go there, right? You've moved into a different area. I will work with you through all your stuff. Just don't give up. Don't walk away. Don't check out. All right? I love what Dr. Prophet said. Fail. Fail enthusiastically. Fail often. Fail creatively. All right? Do something. David's another one. Real quick. Here's David. And the Bible doesn't talk about David's sense of worthlessness. He at one point says, I'm not worthy to be a king's son-in-law. But that's not the focus. And yet we see him beaten down. All right? Everybody's like, nah, it's just David. He shows up to his brothers who are in the army. And he's like, what's going on? And his brothers are like, what are you doing here? Go take care of your sheep. All right? But David acts. He jumps in. He acts long before we see him. He acts while he's watching sheep because he's fighting lions and bears at that point. Right? Face your reality. Take it to God. Don't get stuck in your fear. Be honest about your fears. Take them to God. Take your reality to God. Take your fears to God. Remember the story of Gideon? Oh, man, that's a scared little boy. He's terrified. Guy shows up and says, as he's threshing, now he starts out afraid of the Amalekites. That makes sense. He's threshing grain to eat. He's hiding the Amalekites. They don't want to steal his grain and kill him. I get that. That's common sense, all right? But the angel shows up, says, you are highly favored. And Gideon's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And the angel goes on and says, yeah, I'm gonna deliver Israel through you. And Gideon's like, well, let me have some proof. Brings food, brings drink. The angel touches it, explodes into fire as an offering. Pretty clearly, this is God clearly doing things, right? And God says to Gideon, right then, Judges 6, 23-ish, Gideon saw he was an angel of the Lord. He said, oh no, alas, Lord God, I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face. God says, okay, you're not going to die. It's okay. Breathe. Relax. All right? It's all right. And God says, I want you to go tear down your dad's altar and his idol. And he goes to do it. Verse 23, then Gideon took 10 men of his servants, did as the Lord had spoken to him. But because he was too afraid of his father's household, the men of the city, to do it by day, he did it by night. But he did it. He was scared. But he did it. We go on a little later. A few verses later, the Spirit of the Lord comes on Gideon. He blows a trumpet. Everyone gathers to him. And he sends out messengers. And they call together. And they all gather to Gideon to lead him. And Gideon's like, I don't know about this. God, can I have another sign? Ever notice when he puts out the fleece twice, he's already called an army together. He's a leader. And yet he's terrified. But he doesn't stop acting. He's honest with God. He goes to himself, I'm terrified. I can't do this. Right? And God patiently walks him through it. Delivers through Gideon. Be honest about your fears. Take them to God. And let me just wrap up with a quick note here. New Testament times, God works directly with us through the Holy Spirit. He also very much works through relationships. If we learn to build relationships with other Christians, that's going to help an immense amount when you're feeling like a scared little boy, a scared little girl, don't know what's going on, right? God works through relationship. One of the great values of Bible school, yeah, the classes are good, I hope. I teach some of them, so I hope they are, right? One of the great values is the relationships you build with one another. And I'm not talking about just dating and marriage. That's a whole different thing. But just the relationships that you build, because God works through relationships. And that's one of the great ways today God helps us when we're terrified. Very often he'll speak into your life through a friend, through a mentor, through someone else. Don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in fear. You're gonna be scared sometimes. That's not a bad thing. It's how you respond to it. It determines whether it's something God can use and draw you closer and make you a better leader because of it, or a better person, a stronger person, or whether it becomes a cancer that eats at you. It's a gift. But how we use or misuse that gift has a lot to do with how our life is going to go.
We're glad you joined us. God's Bible School and College prepares students for lives of ministry wherever God calls them. This content is possible because of the generous support of friends like you. To support GBSC, visit giving.gbs.edu. Thank you.